Theft, one of my favourite crimes. As a kid, I loved to steal. I would do it at every opportunity, particularly at school. It started off as simple things like pencils and erasers, then it evolved into things like scissors, glue sticks and craft materials. Eventually, I worked up the courage to steal a book from the library. They practically gave it to me. So long as I promised to give it back 2 weeks later. It was a thrill, taking things I shouldn't have had. It was exhilarating. But the one thing I always wanted to steal was the teacher's laminator. I planned an elaborate heist to sneak into the classroom during lunchtime when I thought no one would be there. I would take the laminator and stash it in my school bag so when I got home, I could laminate whatever I wanted. Drawings, legal documents, my own spit, anything. But I guess the teacher caught on to my schemes. She did not leave the room at any point, and there was nothing I could do to get her to move without giving myself away. It was a long 45 minutes I spent in the stationery cupboard, and it was all for naught. Screw you, Mrs. Edmonds, you ruined my whole childhood. Eventually, as I got older, I grew out of stealing. As the threat of real-world consequences became more and more possible, I retired from a life of crime and moved on to new hobbies like tennis and throwing rocks at people's cars. But the urge to steal, it never really left me. Sometimes I see a thing and think, I want that, and I could so easily take that, but I shouldn't. So I've had to find other ways to scratch this thieving itch. Enter Sly Cooper. I never had a PS2 growing up. I could have stolen one, but I left that life behind, which meant I was left without one. But for a brief period later on in my life, I did have access to one. While visiting extended family in England, I was granted the use of their PS2, and the only game they had was, that's right, you guessed it, a demo disc. Which sucked, but one of the games on there was Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, or, as it's known in PAL regions, Sly Raccoon. It was a short demo, but I loved it. Sneaking around and being a thief in a stealth-focused platformer was just the thing I needed. It gave me that stealing high I hadn't felt since primary school. Once I got back to the land down under, I bought the Sly Cooper HD collection and Thieves in Time to play on the PS3 that I did have, and I never looked back. It was great. Or was it? I experienced these games through a very specific lens, that of an ex-child criminal. I don't steal anymore, and I don't really want to. If I revisited these games, would I still enjoy them as much now that I'm not a thief myself? There's only one way to find out. It's time to see if the Sly Cooper series holds up, starting with Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Let's dance, baby! Our journey begins on the rooftops of Paris, where Sly Cooper intends to break into police headquarters. This seems like a pretty stupid idea. A thief breaking into a police station is like a fly getting comfortable in a spider's web. But I assure you, he has a good reason. You see, Sly has a pretty tragic backstory. He hails from the Cooper clan, a long line of master raccoon thieves who document their adventures and skills in the Thievius Raccoonus, which is passed down through the family. But on one fateful night, as Sly's father intended to pass down the book to Sly, the Fiendish Five ransacked their home. They killed Sly's dad, and each stole 1/5 of the Thievius Raccoonus, then going their separate ways to wreak havoc across the globe. Now, all grown up, Sly, along with his orphanage friends Bentley and Murray, intends to hunt down the Fiendish Five, defeat them, and restore the Thievius Raccoonus to save the Cooper clan from extinction. Many platformers tend not to have great stories. They're often the sort of thing you hear a 4-year-old spit out on a whim. But while that is a shame, most of the time it doesn't matter. However, I feel like I have to acknowledge that the story here is really fucking good. Each character's backstories and motives are laid out plain and clear, and they all have pretty solid personalities, particularly the 4 main characters, Sly, Bentley, Murray, and Carmelita. They interact with each other a fair bit with some well-written banter. I don't expect games like this to have decent writing, but this one does. I never cringed at the dialogue or got bored of the narrative at any point, and I think that deserves recognition. Even the Fiendish Five, whose screen time is very limited, each have their own backstories and subplots going on within the game's greater narrative. Whether it's creating storms to cause shipwrecks, taking over a city, raising an army of undead to invade Mexico, using fireworks to bury villages under snow, or constructing a giant death ray, each member of the Fiendish Five plays a unique role and shows plenty of motive and personality, even when restricted under their single episode of relevance. Most villains in games like this are evil for the sake of being evil, and are just there to fill the space. Villains like Hideous vomit mermaid from Spyro Hero's Tale come to mind, like, who the fuck are you and why are you here? Something I often hear when I show up uninvited to people's baby showers. But the Fiendish 5 actually have some depth and relevance, and I feel compelled to mention and appreciate that. Anyway, Rooftops of Paris. This is a pretty straightforward tutorial level to help you get into the groove and get to feel Sly. As in, controlling Sly, not jacking him off. I know he's got no pants on, but control yourselves. It mainly teaches you how to move, attack, and jump. It also teaches you about those blue sparkles. Sly thinks it's vertigo, but it's actually the game's way of telling you that there's something Sly can interact with. I do find it very endearing how they try to explain this in a way that makes it feel in-universe, but it fails pretty much immediately. They try and immerse you into this world by saying that master raccoon thieves are able to sense thieving opportunities, which manifest themselves as unexplainable blue auras, only to instantly follow that up with press the circle button, and they certainly don't shy away from repeating that.
And hit the circle button to grab it. Jump on
Yep.
the certain narrow spots.
Okay. I think we get it now. Alright! The tutorial is short, but it does a good job of getting you into the zone. After escaping a destructive pursuit from Inspector Carmelita Fox, the game properly begins with the first episode, Tide of Terror. Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus is split into 5 episodes, each focusing on a different member of the Fiendish 5, and each containing a number of levels. In Tide of Terror, we face off against Sir Riley the Frog, and this episode does a great job of demonstrating what this game is all about. The first level covers most of it actually. As Sly, you traverse through linear levels, avoiding hazards, overcoming obstacles, and defeating enemies to reach the end. Now that sounds pretty standard and generic, but Sly Cooper puts its own spin on this formula. As a thief, Sly specializes in stealth, and a lot of the gameplay is centered around that. There are searchlights you have to avoid, there are guards that you can kill in one hit, but if they attack first, they'll kill Sly in one hit, so going in guns blazing isn't the best strategy. You're encouraged to sneak around them. Unless of course Sly is protected by a lucky charm, which takes the form of a horseshoe. I almost said camel toe, that's something else. On top of that, Sly's all-purpose circle button allows him to do all sorts of sneaky thief moves, sneaking around ledges, climbing pipes, ladders and ropes, swinging from hooks, and as you progress further and recover more pages of the Thievius Raccoonus, the circle button unleashes even more of its potential with ninja spire jumps and rail slides and literally turning invisible. Quite useful for a thief. You'd imagine that's the only skill a thief would need, being completely undetectable in every respect. But I suppose that wouldn't make for a fun game, would it? The first level and pretty much every level after it makes the most of Sly's impressive arsenal. Sly is very fun to play as. He's fast, he's nimble, he's responsive, he's handsome, and the levels are built around his abilities very well. They make great use of verticality, and Sly's wide range of abilities means that the levels can be more complex in their structure and layout. And while a lot of them are pretty easy, I can still appreciate what they have to offer. Some of them even have little gimmicks that add an extra layer to it all. A cunning disguise features this barrel that protects you from darts and from being spotted by searchlights. The Lair of the Beast features a giant serpent you have to escape from. And the levels Toot to Tango and Jewel by the Dragon feature Carmelita, who is not only unusually enormous and probably a huge turn-on for furries who are into that sort of thing, but she's also a constant danger to you throughout those levels, actively trying to kill you the whole time. Which could be another turn-on for the furries, who knows? The point is the levels in this game never really get boring. They always have something fun and interesting to offer. To beat the game, you need to collect each level's treasure key. Treasure keys are required to open up new areas in the hub worlds, and eventually allow you to take on each episode's boss. These are found at the very end of each level and serve as their endpoints, but they're not the only collectible. Most levels also contain a number of clues scattered around the place. Collecting them allows Sly to open that level's vault, which will usually reward you with some sort of new move that Sly can perform with the triangle button. Some of these are pretty useful. I was a fan of the dive attack, which was very fast and had some good range, and the roll move was fun to look at. But most of them didn't really come in handy at all. Being able to slow down or speed up time does sound useful, but when you realize that it also slows down or speeds up Sly himself, it kinda defeats the purpose of it. All you're really doing is making the gameplay slower or faster. You're not changing anything in a meaningful way. I also found the mine and the decoy moves to be pretty worthless as well. I mean, if you want to distract enemies or lay traps for them, you can, but the game is pretty easy. Enemies go down in one hit, so if you know their attack patterns, there isn't much stopping you from just running up and hitting them instead of doing all this bullshit. Defeat the enemy with an attack? No, I'd rather leave my hat on the ground. That said, I do like that it gives you the option. These moves are a little something extra. Clues are an optional collectible, but these new moves incentivize going out of your way to collect them all. A lot of games like this don't even bother to try and encourage you to go for the optional stuff. In Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, you'll always be rewarded handsomely for your efforts. Unless things happen to be written in owl dialect. Hoot hoot! Translation, get fucked. This game knows what it's good at and sticks to it. The levels are often dynamic and fun, and the standard gameplay is pretty hard to fault. It would be a real shame if someone were to barge in and ruin everything, wouldn't it? Listen, I have nothing against Murray as a character. He's probably my favourite anthropomorphic pink hippo, and there's no one I'd rather have driving the getaway vehicle. But when he gets involved in the gameplay, things take a U-turn for the worst. Murray is playable in the capacity of driving the van in races. These races are on a Smokey and the Bandicoot level of quality, which is not a compliment. The van is unnaturally bouncy and slippery, and it isn't great to control. It's so bad to the point where I couldn't tell if the icy road was causing the slipperiness, or if that was just how the van moves. This is one of the game's low points. Another low point comes in the form of turret levels, where Sly has to defend Murray from incoming threats using a turret. And it's just kind of boring. It isn't adding anything of value. I also don't understand why they're getting Murray to do this. Sly is the thief. He's more than capable of going up there and getting the key himself. Why would he decide to get Murray, who he describes in-game as, and I quote, a full-time burden, to do it instead? It doesn't make sense. Full-time burden is right. Fuck off, Murray. Actually, that's not fair. It's not Murray's fault. There are other weird gameplay choices this game has made. Sly has his own hovering turret vehicle that's actually not that bad to use. I mean, I'd rather be Sly on foot, but it's fine enough. You've also got this strange submarine level where you have to stop crabs from stealing treasure, as well as these weird chicken and piranha minigames that are just baffling more than anything, especially the piranha one. You only have 2 minutes to light the torches, and the only way to light the torches is to kill piranhas and use them as a source of oil? Why exactly is Sly doing this instead of, climbing over the gate, like a thief would do? Even Bentley gets involved towards the end, but it's kind of just the submarine thing with a different coat of paint. Basically what I'm saying is anytime the game doesn't let you just play as Sly, it's worse than just playing as Sly. Which is why I'm confused as to why the final episode in the game, the grand finale, is mostly all of this vehicle bullshit. Turrets and controlling the van and more turrets. Why? There are some decent platforming sections, but why would they make the ending of this game a gauntlet of all of its worst bits? It's like making a cake using only flour and eggs. What a delicious concoction that would be. Even the final boss is basically another turret game, which sucks because Clockwork is actually a great antagonist. He's got a cool, unique design and an admittedly very edgy personality, but he's still a cool main villain. It's just a shame that his fight had to be tarnished with this rubbish. I have seen worse, but that doesn't make it okay. The Cold Heart of Hate could not be a more fitting name for this episode, because my cold heart hates what they decided to do with it. The boss fights generally are pretty weak across the board. To put it into perspective, Clockworks is one of the better ones. Which is a shame because they do such a good job of hyping up the villains. The build-up is great, even for the very first member of the Fiendish Five. You're taking on Sir Raleigh, who left his boring life of comfort and luxury to turn to piracy, becoming the chief machinist of the Fiendish Five, using his contraptions to commit dastardly crimes. He's one of the world's most wanted criminals. And then you get to the fight and it's this. Like, come on man, do these guys some justice. Mugshot's fight isn't much better, with an inexplicable focus on mirrors that somehow destroy his guns. Why would you construct such a mirror-based arena that only serves to benefit your opponent? Speaking of Mugshot, by the way, I love how his whole backstory is about him going from a wimp to a big muscly brute, but the guns he uses in the fight aren't even the ones he worked so hard to get. Ms. Ruby's fight is alright in concept, but because I'm playing the HD collection, her attacks weren't in time with the music, which defeated the whole point, and caused the two halves of my brain to go to war with each other, eventually spiraling me into a state of confusion and helplessness that deleted all of my basic motor skills. I would have preferred that the rhythm part of this rhythm game was working with the music. And then you've got the Panda King, who is pathetically easy and poses no real threat. The only thing he's capable of is annoying you by announcing his attacks.
Fiery wheel, 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 fiery wheel.
So yeah, the game has weaknesses, but I reckon it more than makes up for those weaknesses with its strengths, especially with the standard gameplay, which is most of the game. I think the Master Thief sprints really highlight them. Master Thief sprints are this game's equivalent of time trials, but instead of simply timing how long you take to beat a level, you instead have a countdown, and the only way to successfully complete them is to reach the end before the timer hits 0. These are actually pretty challenging, the ones I attempted at least. They have strict time limits, and you're forced to make the most of Sly's moveset. Some of the moves unlocked from vaults came in handy here, especially the funny looking raccoon roll, which worked wonders on downhill slopes. They even emphasise stealth, as getting caught by searchlights and guards speed up the countdown. If anything, Master Thief sprints demonstrate what this game is great at: stealth-focused platforming as a character with very flexible mobility and a deliciously large variety of moves at his disposal. While I didn't go through and do all of the Master Thief sprints because they were, ironically, taking too long for me to beat, they really helped me to further appreciate what this game has to offer. Something else this game does well that I've barely touched on is the presentation. I think it's brilliant. The cartoony, wacky visual style perfectly suits the story and characters, and the music is fittingly cheeky and sneaky. It might not be the most memorable soundtrack, but it perfectly matches the settings and vibes the game is going for. It definitely does look and sound like a PS2 game, but considering that in the year this game originally came out, 2002, we also got Spyro Actually Transmitted Disease, I think it ended up looking and sounding pretty well. I feel like I have to mention as well the art style in the cutscenes. Oh, mwah, it's perfect. It almost looks like an animated comic book. Having stylized cutscenes like that really adds flavor to it all. I wish more games did stuff like that. Even little details like that funny noise that Sly's footsteps make when he's sneaking around just add to the charm of it all. This game's presentation stole my heart. Actually, the whole game stole my heart. Even though I'm a reformed member of society, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus still spoke to me. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed revisiting the game all these years later. It does so many things right. It's one of the few platformers of this style to have a good story and well-written characters who at least have an amount of depth. It's presented very well and in a way that suits the vibe of the game, and the gameplay, most of the time, is absolutely phenomenal. Sly is fun to play as, and while the levels are usually pretty easy, they still have interesting designs and layouts that makes the most of Sly's abilities. The game only takes a few wrong steps, things like bosses being absolute jokes even despite their incredible build-ups, and also things like vehicles and weird gimmicks becoming more and more prevalent as you progress through the game, causing the cold heart of hate to feel like a bit of an anticlimax. Besides that, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus is an amazing game that thieves and law-abiding citizens alike can enjoy.